Good morning, and welcome to our webinar on averages and variability. My name is Tony Morgan, and I'm joined here by Dr. Rob Neal. Dr. Neal, thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure, Tony.
Yeah, we're excited to bring to you this webinar today, really focusing on how to look at multiple swings. How do you get into the data and really find some practical applications that can help your players get better? At the end of the day, that's the main focus we want to cover, is how to look at this information and help players get better faster. So with that being said, I'd like to go through today's, a little bit about our background. Dr. Neal's with Golf Biodynamics. Most of you probably know Dr. Neal. Travels all around the world with his company, Golf Biodynamics, and really uses biomechanics to help coaches and players both get better. So we're really excited to have him here today. I was fortunate enough last year to go to St. Andrews with Dr. Neal. We spoke at the World Scientific Congress of Golf, and we really were looking at the effects of biofeedback on motor learning. And so we're really excited to be involved with him and appreciate him taking the time today. My name is Tony Morgan, as I mentioned earlier, and I'm a PGA golf professional with KVest. And my goal today is to bring together the practical application of the information that we go through. I know we've got a lot of KVest customers that are on this webinar, and as we go through things like the software, I want to make sure that you know how to use the new features that will bring this information to light that Dr. Neal is going to present today. So the webinar topics that we're going to cover today is the importance of studying averages and variability versus single swing assessments. So for many of you, especially that have had KVest over the last 10 plus years, we've really been only equipped to look at one swing at a time. At best, we could maybe take one swing, we could compare it to another swing. So with the new multi-swing report, we're going to talk about the importance of actually looking at variability over a course of swings that you could do in a session or over a period of time. We're then going to talk about the difference in variability between tour players and amateurs. So as many of you know, in our software today, a lot of what we have done is looked at a player's data in relation to the PGA or LPGA tour. Well, now being able to look at variability, we can actually see how consistent players are within their own patterns, and then how consistent is that related to a subset of PGA Tour players. So that's going to be a great topic for Dr. Neal to jump into. We're also going to look at how to practically apply the knowledge of variability when coaching. So how does this change when we set up biofeedback programs? How does things like standard deviation change the way we look at tolerances and ranges when we're building our programs? And finally, we're going to look at acceptable and non-acceptable levels of variability. So when do we know that maybe the average is a problem, the average number of a certain metric, or when is it actually more of a variability issue or a consistency within that pattern?
So for some reason, Tony, I'm not getting the updated image, but that's all right. And I'm not sure exactly why, but I can speak to the, yeah, I don't know, do you have to change it manually, Tony?
Yeah, you should be seeing it now.
I've got it now, yes.
Okay.
So one of the criticisms that I've leveled at various measurement systems that are currently used is that they take a single swing only and then do a workup on that. And that's not a criticism of the way they do the analysis portion, but it's you only get a limited amount of information about that person if you only look at a single swing. And then experience in the field has led me to say to actually investigate how different someone's swings are from shot to shot, and therefore how much the mean changes. So I'm sure Tony in a practical situation can relate to this one. So you're testing someone and the guy hits a shank. He says, oh, don't keep that one, that's not what I usually do. You go, okay, yeah, that's fine. Or it hits one fat or hits one thin. They don't want to keep that. They only want to do the analysis on their very best shot. So if you only do a single swing analysis, that's all you'll get information on, is what they did on that single shot, rather than either what they did on average or how consistent they were in being able to reproduce that movement pattern. And so, and then you get no insight either into how different the swings are between what they think is a great shot for them versus one that'd be characterized as a very poor shot. So this new feature in the KVest software, I think, is a great addition, because it will allow you as a user of that system to access information about your clients that you, to this point, did not have access to. So Tony, I think we should move to the next slide there, where we're looking at just a very, very simple example. And the reason I chose this one is that the numbers turn out to be nice and easy, and I'm sure people will follow along. So let's say you've got your launch monitor set up, and it doesn't matter what brand it is, but you've got a client up there, and the first swing, they make the face angles +5, and this thing goes screaming out to the right. And then the next swing they make, it's -5. So obviously that one goes left. And then +2, the third swing, -2. And I've chosen these numbers because the math is very easy. If you added those up and divided by 4, you'd get an average of 0 for the face angle. So you go, oh wow, this guy does a great job in presenting the club face in a neutral orientation at impact. Yeah, we don't need to worry about that. And if you only had access to the mean data, that would be the conclusion you would have to draw. His average is 0. But not once did he actually present the club face 0 at impact. Every time it was different from 0. It just happens that the average was 0. So if you looked only at a single swing, you'd get a very skewed piece of information about this player. If you looked at just the average, you'd say, oh, yeah, this guy's pretty good. But if you get average and variability, so the standard deviation is the typical measure of variability, then you can get full insight into what he does on average or regularly versus what his variability is. In fact, how different you might expect each swing to be. And I think from a coaching perspective, that's golden material for you to use.
Great.
So what I did here is I took some data from some pretty good players. These are, again, I've chosen TrackMan data this time because the values are what's known as discrete. So at impact, you get a certain value, and that's it. Whereas when you're using your KVest, you will be getting measurements as a function of time. And so you might choose at particular points in time, say at address or top of backswing or impact, to look at particular values. That would be discrete analysis of those time series data. But in this example here, and it's a little difficult to see because of the size of the numbers, but we have two good players, clubhead speeds with 6 irons around 95 miles an hour. So the averages are pretty similar. If you look at the club path data, you'll see quite different. You know, one player, player 1, his path is virtually 0, neutral. And player 2 swings the club out to the right. The attack angles are very different. And I think that if you, I just need to get my notes up here. If you look at the standard deviations, that's when you'll get some nice insights into these data. So I think that, Tony, you might help me out here because I can't quite read this, but the standard deviations for club speed or club path or attack angle. What are they? Of the order of 1 or 2 degrees?
Yeah, so club speed for player 1 plus 1.3 for the 94.5, and for player 2 1.0 for
So
speed.
their variability in terms of speed is almost identical.
That's right. And then for club path for player 1 that's close to 0, it's plus 2.4, and for club path 4.3, standard deviation to 1.4.
So in fact, the fellow who's delivering the club to the right, so player number 2, is actually more consistent at doing that than the guy who has a 0 path.
That's
right, Tony? Just, in ballpark.
That's right.
If we have a look at the carry distance and the standard deviations there, there's some really nice insights that we'll gain. Because the carry distance for player 1 was 157, obviously number 2 was 170. But again, Tony, if you could read out the standard deviations there.
Yeah, and you were looking there, sorry, at attack angle?
No, carry distance.
Oh, carry distance, sorry. So for carry distance 157, that was plus or minus 19.1. And for the 170.4, that's standard 5.9.
Right, so we'll say, that's interesting because the means are different for one thing, but the variability is very, very different. So we could say that player 1 delivered the club quite nicely, at least according to the club delivery numbers provided by TrackMan. But the carry distance variability was huge. And so you've got to worry about the quality of contact, or perhaps the information that's coming from the measuring device as well. Maybe there was one really bad swing amongst those that then skewed the whole thing. So I think that if we bear in mind that we need to look not just at what you do on average, but also how consistent you are, then you're going to get some better insights into that player. And Tony, I'm sure you're familiar with the Sam Putt Lab. They provide a consistency measure with their putting software. So I think that's a really good thing to have access to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, those are just good examples. Like, instead of just jumping into, 3D data, a lot of this is what you are already doing today from consistency. So we simply wanted to draw the parallel that, you're looking at consistency in your launch monitor data, and as we get into 3D, really becomes the same thing. It just the ability to do that wasn't there before. So as a segue here, I was thinking about, what are some questions as we get into 3D portion of this now that I certainly had and that you all may have, and really get some of Dr. Neal's insight on. And the first question is, when do you report averages? When you're in a session, how do you know whether to look at the numbers? How do you know whether to look at the averages? And I guess, Doc, is that change based on the type of player you're with?
I think that you should always look at the averages, and then also, given the skill level of the player, look at the standard deviations or the measures of consistency. And I think, for example, if you're working with a young player who wants to play college golf, then you should have some idea of what sorts of measurements they need to be able to do, create. Maybe it's in terms of club head speed, it might be in terms of consistency of body rotations at impact, or how big their turn should be, things like that, in order for you to assess whether they are doing the right things that would lead them to a higher probability of success in achieving their goal. If you don't report the averages, you might get an underestimate of what their club head speed is or how well they're moving their body, versus an overestimate if perhaps you happen to choose one swing again that was well away from the mean.
Right. That makes sense. So next question, what are the sources of variability and how do you define that?
So there are a number of places in which we will get variability occurring. So when we are not machines, so we can't make exactly the same golf swing every time. So there's human variability. And in fact, that's a really good thing, because when we're on the golf course, although we might practice on a mat or on a flat tee, we're going to have different lies, different length shots, and we need to have some variability in our system to be able to accommodate the challenges that we would find on the golf course. So don't think about variability only as a bad thing, that we need to actually really make it as small as we possibly can. Yes, you do need to do that if you're doing the same task over and over again. So if we're hitting balls on the range, we need to have our variability really low. But we need some ability to be able to adapt as well, and so that's an important part of playing golf. So whenever we put a measurement system into play, that measurement system itself has variability and has error. And so you have to know about that as well. So if you're using a launch monitor to measure what the ball and the club are doing, then you should have a very deep understanding of how reliable those measures are, how consistent, and how repeatable. So if we had a robot hitting golf shots, and that robot was able to deliver the club exactly the same way and hit the ball exactly the same way, and then we measured with your launch monitor the average club head speed maybe, or the spin rate of the ball, or whatever variable you want to look at, they wouldn't be identical every time, because the ball's different. You actually hit maybe a slightly different place on the club face or on a dimple, and all of these sorts of things bring in variability. But another source of variability would be how well your sensors are attached. Now, I know that K-Vest have done a really good job in developing harnesses that accommodate all different sized people, but still hug to the body really well. Because if we get sensor movement relative to the body part, then we're going to get really poor data. Even if we took the average, we'll get poor data, because we're not really measuring the movement of the body segment. We end up measuring just what the sensor is reporting. And so that's a big source of variability in biomechanics. So we need to be aware of that. And then, Tony, I think that's a good point, or a good way to lead into knowing the accuracy of the K-Vest sensors. It's important to know.
Yeah, for sure. So with the K-Vest sensors, or even with the K-Player sensors, when you're doing biofeedback, we're at plus or minus a quarter degree on 2 axes, and we're plus or minus 1 degree on 1 axis. So, as you're using your system, you could say, everything is inside a degree, but, really on 2 of those, we're even inside of a quarter degree. So, very accurate from a measurement side. So really anything above that 1, is going to come back to the player and not the system.
Yeah, and I think that should give you confidence in saying, if you took multiple swings from a player and the sensors were attached properly and so forth, and you got a mean of 90 degrees for the upper torso turn at the top of the backswing, you'd be very, very confident that the measurement that you've got is accurately representing the movement of the person. Now, if the variability in the way this person turns, so that maybe the standard deviation in their golf swings was plus or minus 5 degrees, again, it would show you that the variability that you're measuring there is more to do with the movement of the golfer than it is to do with the sensor that you're looking at. But if you had sensors that were only accurate to plus or minus 5 degrees, for example, then you wouldn't be able to have the same confidence about what you're going to say to your client, one. And secondly, you wouldn't know where the variability is coming from. Is it coming from the sensor, or is it coming from the person? So that's why I think it's important for the audience to understand that they need to know intimately about the devices they're using. And this is true whether you're using a KVS system, a launch monitor of any type. It could be a golf biodynamic system or the Polhemus hardware. It doesn't matter. You need to know about it so that you can be confident about what you would say to your client. Because I think that the worst thing that you could do is give them the wrong message based on spurious data.
Yeah, yeah. Great. So next question, when do you report variability? When is it important actually to report on that in a session?
So I think it's important to realize that if you're looking at beginners, you're going to get high variability. That's the nature of the of motor learning. And as you get better and better and better at a skill, you should see a decline in the standard deviations or an improvement in consistency until you get to the very pointy end of the pyramid when you're looking at tour players, where they're able to repeat the pattern of movement time and time again within probably, like even the body movements, within a degree or within a quarter of an inch or things like that. So I think when you're dealing with high level players, the consistency factor is crucial. When you're dealing with perhaps your club golfers, you've got to know what's realistic for them as well. So if a tour player is plus or minus a degree, don't expect your club golfer to be in that ballpark. Maybe plus or minus 3 degrees is reasonable for that person because they're only playing golf once a week. So I think it's something that you don't necessarily blurt out to your clients all the time, but would be something that you kind of look at and go, okay, yeah, this guy's really inconsistent in his pattern here. I wonder why. And then you find out, oh, he's got a stability issue on his right side, and that's why his pelvis movement isn't as good as it should be, or things like that. So I think the variability gives you insight into maybe some of the problems that you would look at. So, for example, when you look at a kinematic sequence graph, if you see lots of fluctuations along the angular velocity curves, then you're getting insight into the variability of the person or the stability of that person to produce the speeds in any one swing. So that would be how I would attack that issue, Tony. If when you report it, I wouldn't stick it in people's faces because most people don't really understand it, but use it to guide maybe a biofeedback session or a learning. So expect increased variability if you ask someone to do something different than they're normally doing.
That's great. All right, last question that I think will be really helpful for users. How do you define consistency, and how do you think you can help our users that are using KVS define consistency with their players? What specifically do we look at? And maybe specifically for different levels of players as well. How does that change?
I can give you some really good examples from putting, but I think that as people end up using the multi-swing reports, Tony, that they'll start to realize that when you're looking at tour players, you've got to expect probably plus or minus a degree in terms of turns, bends, tilts, all of that sort of thing. An average golfer, I think, if you were plus or minus 3 degrees, so a standard deviation of 3, then you'd be looking at a reasonably consistent pattern with this player. When it gets beyond 5 degrees or whatever the measurement might be, plus or minus an inch, then we're starting to look at large variability. And so we've got some issues with stability of the system then. So consistency is really just your ability to reproduce the same movement time and time again in the same situation. So give someone a 7-iron, ask them to hit 10 shots. how consistently can they reproduce their pattern of movement, and not ask them to hit 10 different types of shots or different shape shots or trajectories or whatever, because you'd expect variability to go up if you ask them to do something different. Does that help you, Tony, to understand what we mean by consistency then?
Yeah, I think that's great. And as we get into some data later in the webinar, I think we'll bring a lot of this stuff to life as well.
So from a player's perspective, Tony, I think these are the things that you need to know, right?
Yep.
You need to know what you do on average and how consistent you are. So I'll break it down into real simple things for a player. That it doesn't necessarily need to be 3D data here. Let's say you've got a 7-iron in your hands and you hit that club 165 yards on average. That's your carry distance, right? But how consistent are you? Is this plus or minus 2 yards, or 1 yard, like a tour player? Or is it plus or minus 10 yards, like a typical club golfer? Or is it worse than that?
Right.
Because I think that if you know what you do on average, that's great. But if you know what your variability is, then you have a much better chance of predicting the outcome of any shot that you're going to hit. And that's really what golf is about, is knowing how large your error is going to be on any one shot, right? And then how close you can get to the hole. So I often use this example with people. Is you could take any golfer and their very, very best shot is going to be as good as a tour player. Like if they take their 7-iron and they hit their Sunday best and it ends up within 20 centimeters of the hole or 6 inches of the hole, the tour player is not going to do any better than that, really, because everyone's going to make that 6-inch putt or that 20 centimeter putt, right?
Yep.
It's then how good is your average? So the tour player might have a proximity of, let's say, 5 meters or 15 feet. Whereas your proximity, Tony, as a pretty good golfer, might be 30 feet. And
right.
Average club golfer, that might be 45 feet. So the variation around the mean is I think part of what you need to do in terms of consistently making good decisions on the golf course. So if you've got a 165-yard carry to a flag that's 5 yards on from a bunker or from a water hazard, then the tour player says that's not a problem. I can hit this 165 yards, and I'm really comfortable that 95 times out of 100 I'm going to hit it within 5 yards of that distance.
Right.
So either 167 or 163 yards. So no problem clearing that bunker.
Right.
The club golfer, though, if he's plus or minus 15 yards, then that water hazard's in big play. And maybe a better decision could be made in terms of club selection if you know your variability. So that's an example in terms of decision making in golf for a player, but the same kind of principles hold for a coach working with a player as well. In that, how consistent are they? If they're really consistent in doing something, maybe it's not the best advice to go and change that. Maybe there are other little workarounds that will actually provide you a better result in a lesson than saying, I have my principles and someone needs to swing this way and that's what everyone's going to do. So
right.
You go, all right, this guy delivers the club 5 degrees to the left, but he does it really consistently. Maybe we should not worry about trying to change that pattern and instead ensure that his alignment's better and things like that would allow him to go out and play better golf.
Yeah, and I would say on that, just to add to that, I think that makes a ton of sense. And the other thing is, if you look at the second bullet, for example, the best shot is as good as anyone's. We had a gentleman in here 2 weeks ago that was a +2 handicap. It's going to be heading down to Florida to give it a run. And, you know, the question to him was, you know, how's your stock shot compared to the best players in the world? And his answer was, it's not my stock shot. I feel like my stock shot is as good as anyone's out there. It's the miss. And if you look at the way we've done our assessments in KVS, and there's some merit to it, the other way that we're talking about now is being able to compare this player to his best self, or we say, you know, train to your best swing. So, you know, what was interesting, like for this player, a real world example, you know, we were able to capture 10 swings, and 6 of them, he said, well, that's my stock shot. And we were able to look at the variability or the standard deviation of those 6. And then the 4, where the pattern wasn't what we wanted, we were actually able to compare that pattern to his good pattern, then build a biofeedback program off his best. And it was actually, instead of saying, well, here's you compared to a tour player, or here's you compared to a subset of data, it made a lot of sense to him that this was actually comparing him to him when he was at his best and giving him feedback on where he was when he didn't move the right way, or he caught it a little thin or off the toe, and he got some, you know, shot shape that he didn't want. So, you know, I think that would be like a real world example just from having this report in the last 3 weeks and playing with it. It's been very interesting to be able to go in now and provide that level of story to a player that wouldn't have been clear before.
That's great, Tony. So let's keep moving here, or otherwise we won't get through all of the material. I've been talking too much, but so I'm going to move through these ones reasonably quickly. So anyone who has worked with me in the past will know that I always collect multiple swings, and I won't build a report unless I have probably, well, in the Doral days when Jim McLean was on my back saying, look, we got to get this guy out of here, I went down to 3 swings. That was my minimum. But my preference is to get 6 to 8 swings, capture those, and then build a report based on that. So, and that's what the biomechanical research says. 8 swings, you've got a really high likelihood of getting data that are going to be representative of whatever it is that you're measuring. So I think bear in mind that I typically will do 5 or 6 swings and feel reasonably confident about that. Obviously, if you go beyond 8 swings, it's going to be time that doesn't give you very much more information. So it's time to capture it, but doesn't really give you much more information, if any, in fact. So try to remember 5 to 8 swings is plenty. Get that done as quickly as you can, but do it properly, and then go on and get your work done with the player. Yeah. So that's why I said here 5 to 6 swings, and I would always, with touring professionals, move on the higher side of that, because the variability is going to be lower, and you want to get a clear assessment of that. A bit like Tony just did with the player who was going down to Florida. Look at what they did on 10 swings, 6 were fine, 4 were not so good, and then you can get a really good idea of what they do on average. Yeah. And then remember that there might be differences in the way someone moves with a driver versus a mid-iron versus a wedge, and so don't think that just because they do this with a 6-iron that that's what they're going to do with their driver. Right. In fact, quite the opposite. I often see substantial variation in swing movements with driver and mid-iron. So if we continue to move on, you go, what are the risks of not doing it? Clearly, you could draw the wrong conclusion. If you got a set of data, the guy's got the perfect kinematic sequence on this one swing, and it's an outlier, you'll go, well, we don't need to worry about your sequencing, do we? And off you go. You make the wrong decision, and then you look bad rather than looking good for doing the 3D work. I think that by knowing what they do on average too, it allows you to compare either to themselves when they're at their best, or as they're improving, if you're developing a player, or to give them some measure compared to a tour player set of data, whether that be male or female. And I think lastly, if you say, I'm going to take what you do on average, I think there's much less risk of you making an error in your judgment and your assessment of that player. And that's why I've done that right from the beginning. So that's when I started Golf Biodynamics way back in 2000, and I wrote my own software. I always wrote it for multiple swings.
Yeah.
So I've kind of already talked to this slide, Tony, saying that you know, all of our measurement devices have inherent measurement error, and you need to know about that. So you need to know whether you're assessing the variability of the instrument or the variability of the player. And if you don't know what your instrument variability is, then you have no way of distinguishing whether it's the person or the instrument. And so I think with K-Vest, you've got very accurate sensors for measuring those rotations, and you should be confident. As long as you've attached them properly and calibrated properly, then you should be able to get solid readings on the biomechanics of a person swinging the golf club. And I do say attach them properly and calibrate properly, because if it's not calibrated properly, it's the old adage, garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
So I know that Tony probably spends quite a bit of time on the certification courses and training, ensuring that people attach the sensors properly, do the calibrations, maybe even during a session check that there hasn't been sensor movement, and do a quick recal as you're going through, because otherwise you might be, again, telling the wrong story.
That's right. Great.
So,
good. So I think this is a great segue to actually be able to get in, especially for all the K-Vest customers, or even for those of you that don't use 3D on the webinar. I'd like to show you the new multi-swing report and where you actually access this in the software. So I'm going to head over to K-Vest here, and basically we're just going to start on the home screen, and I'm going to go into a client that we loaded, that we worked with a couple of weeks ago. And you'll see right on the bottom of this screen, right underneath the Motions tab, there's a new button here called Multi-Swing Report. So all you simply do is you click this button, and this will now bring up the Multi-Swing Report. So very simple. You can take a look at the last 5 swings. You can take a look at the last 10, the last 15, or all. So for this particular player, I'm going to go ahead and click last 15. And I just want to walk you through how this was used as an example of someone that came in the studio, and actually how we used the data for this session. So this was a high school player. I believe she was a junior. And you can see here, we've obviously got all the numbers of the swings. And down below here, we can take a look at the average. We can take a look at the median. And down below, you can also see the standard deviation. So very quickly here, we can really start to come in and see, what obviously were the averages of the numbers we were looking at, whether it was bend or side bend or rotation for the player at 3 different areas of the swing. But we can also look and see, where was this player inconsistent on the bottom from a standard deviation side? Where was there a lot of variability? And I'll tell you, to be transparent with this player, this wasn't just 10 stock shots that we captured. I'm going to walk you through actually just a little bit of what we did, and then I want to open it up to Dr. Neal to maybe give us a little bit more insight into how he would use this report. So you'll notice here, if we take a look, let's just say, for example, at pelvis bend, you can see the first swing down the bottom at 1019 at 352. Our pelvis bend was 31 degrees. And you can see for about the next 7 swings, it was anywhere between 31 and 36 degrees. This is actually where we first started to capture. So what I'm going to do is, if you notice down below, there's a standard deviation for pelvis bend at 6.07. Well, the reason that is because we actually went in and we started to do a little bit of pelvis bend training. This player was struggling with path left, face was a little bit open, and got into a little bit of reverse spine angle. You can actually see over here as the pelvis bend gets high, if we go over to top and we look at bend, you can start to see there becomes some pretty high, a little reverse spine angle at the top. So we correlated something we just wanted to test with this player. What happens if we got a more neutral pelvis bend? How would that affect upper body bend, their ability to sequence? And most importantly, how is that going to help the player hit the little draw that she wanted to hit that she was struggling with? So this was actually us testing a few different drills and trying to find out. So you'll notice now, if I come in and I unselect these first swings and I just leave the first 7 that we captured. Well, now notice pelvis bend at a 1.40 standard deviation. So her average, even though it may have been high, was very consistent. Her median was very consistent. So we weren't going after the standard deviation in this particular case. We were actually trying to change the number. Different maybe than a scenario where there was a high standard deviation throughout 5 or 6 or 7 stock shots. So you can see after we did that scenario, you can start to see the pelvis bend numbers change. We did 3 swings. It's interesting to start to see how that changes torso bend at top. We actually started to make some changes in torso bend at top, which was one of our correlations. And we also started to see some of the face and path relationships change. But once again, this was just a test. And it's great that you can now do all your own tests in the software to go, what is the drill? What change do I want to make that's going to have the biggest impact, on a particular player? The last thing I'll just mention here is you'll also see if I select these back in, you'll notice the top 2 swings, and Dr. Neal actually pointed this out yesterday. He's going, what's the deal with torso turn and impact? Tony, I'm not sure the measurements are right there on those 2 swings. So we actually had an opportunity to talk, and I said, actually, at the end, one of the other things that we worked on was another drill to see once again, which one worked best. We worked on some biofeedback to try and get that torso a little bit more stable for this player at impact to help shallow out the path. So this was an example here of simply how we use the report to go, what are a couple different things that we could do with a player to see what changed the data and what actually worked best for the player. And where I really enjoyed being able to go through it was to go, when I pulled out these 2 swings, well, standard deviation for torso rotation, was still fairly low. However, we were actually just going after, actually still fairly high. So we possibly had too much torso rotation and impact, but there was also a lot of variability. And that was something that we looked at. So Doc, I'd love to get your feedback on, what are some things that you think, KVest users or people that are getting into 3D, what are some things that you want to make sure they take away from this report?
Well, I think we continue with your example of the pelvis bending at setup there, Tony.
Yep.
So the first 7 swings you captured, the standard deviation was 1.4. And
yep.
You might want to change the mean, but and I think you would want to do that. But how do you set the boundaries? So at the moment, you can go and set live and say, well, this is what the current value should be, and then you build some sort of corridor around that that's somewhat arbitrary. Well, now you have a numerical way of doing it. You can go, all right, well, the standard deviation was 1.4. If we give them a plus or minus 2.8, or let's call it 3 degrees, either side of the mean value that you want them to have it set up, then I think that's very achievable. So statistically, you'd say 95% of the value should lie within 2 standard deviations either side of your mean. So, Tony, if you went to biofeedback here and you said, all right, well, how do we set the average pelvis bend at setup? What's the appropriate way to do that? And then how do you build the plus or minus 3 degrees around that? I think that's going to be a useful example for the KVest users in the group.
Yeah, great. So we can do that very quickly. So I'm just in live biofeedback mode now. I'll show you just even quickly something we just did with this player to help them find their neutral. I've already calibrated here. I'll actually just calibrate again quickly.
Calibration in 3, 2, 1. Calibration complete.
All right, we can see that pelvis bend starts around 10 degrees. So all I would do is I'd have the player get in. I would have them posterior tilt as far as they possibly can. I'd have them anterior tilt. Then I would have them find what would deem to be their neutral. And then I would click Set Live. Now what Dr. Neal was just saying is now we just set the mean. I think that was 25 degrees. And as you can see, that tolerance right now is plus or minus 8. So it's going 17 anywhere up to 33. So what you can do in the software now is we can go 2 times that standard deviation, and we can actually tighten up this tolerance so it becomes 22 to 28. So now this is where the player is now going to train. That range becomes 2 times their standard deviation. So that becomes a really easy way that you can actually go in and you can use this data right in your training programs. And then the next stage of this, if I wanted to make it more challenging or I wanted to up the learning process as far as making this a harder skill to adapt, I may come in and tighten this up, drop down the variance, and once again we could then take this down to 23 to 26 degrees, which now we're literally in that one-time standard deviation.
I think that's a great feature, Tony, because you could make it too easy for someone and then you wouldn't get them in the right position with a neutral pelvis, and this would give them accurate feedback about how close they need to be or how consistently they need to be able to find that position. So Tony, I think we should just quickly move on now to a couple of those swing examples that you've given us here. If you can talk us through them, and I will just highlight the key things that I'd like to mention here.
Yeah, so this is a couple of swings. We actually captured with this player 10 swings, and this is the first swing that we captured. I'll actually and I would say just one thing just to make note of, maybe take a look at the pelvis velocity where you see the red icon here. That's maximum peak velocity, and where that is in relation to impact, we would call that timing. As we go from swing to swing, you can actually start to see that change to swing 5 as we highlight that area, and then you can see almost the timing moves back. The player's a little bit more in sequence at swing 8. So I think, Doc, what we were talking about here as we go through these different swings, moving back and forth, this is probably where we really need to be careful looking at just one kinematic sequence as well. And I know I've personally made the mistake of doing this and, going in, looking at one sequence, going, all right, your timing's off, let's get timing better. But boy, maybe if they'd have just hit 3 more shots, got a little bit more loose, maybe the timing wasn't even an issue. And so now, not only the ability to look at the orientations, but also the velocities over a period of time becomes really important.
Yeah, and Tony, without being too presumptive, you guys are currently building this feature so that you'll be able to look at the time series data as well as the discrete variables, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, looking at the kinematic sequence and bringing in things like, maximum velocity and transition sequence, bringing those into a report obviously is very important. So that's something that's in the works.
That's great, Tony. I think we probably need to go to that summary slide now, and we'll go, well, these are the key things that we think you need to take away from today's webinar. I think, firstly, when you have access to averages, that gives you a good insight into what the person does from shot to shot, or from most of the time. But accessing the standard deviations or their measure of consistency is crucial as well to decide really what their motor skill level is like. You can use the measures of standard deviation to help guide you in biofeedback and training, and then expect that if you make a change with someone, initially you'd expect the consistency to be poorer or the standard deviation to be larger, but as they learn, you should anticipate also that those standard deviations would reduce, that they become more consistent. And the last point is just to know where the variability in your measurement system is. Is it the player? Is it the measurement system? Or is it a combination of both? So if you have insights into those things, I think that will help to make you a better coach in terms of providing the correct information to your students.
Great. Thanks, Dr. Neal. And I think at this time we're going to open it up for some questions. Mason, are you on?
I am on. Great job, guys. A lot of good information here. So we're getting close to the top of the hour, so I'll get right into it. One question we've got from multiple people, Tony, is what if I don't have the multiple swing report button? So maybe you explain about the new software launch that's coming.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, anybody that doesn't have that version yet, that's going to be KVS version 7.8. We're actually in the process of distribution right now. So if you're in the Loop program, you will be receiving that in the coming weeks. As you know, we typically roll our distribution out over a period of time to make sure that we support you. So if you haven't got it yet, don't worry, but you will be getting it as long as you're in the Loop program or the software program. That'll be the 7.8 version. There's also some new features that come out with that as well. So the great thing is once you have it, by the way, this may be obvious to make sure it's known. You can now go back into all the players you've previously captured, and you can actually look at their averages. So it's nothing moving forward. It can also be for all the players you've captured in the past. You can get back and you can look at that data now in different ways.
But only if you captured multiple swings.
That's right. Thank you. That's right.
All right, we have a question from Steven. Is there any plan on releasing a multiple efficiency report?
Yeah, I can. Yeah, I think Doc asked that just a few minutes ago, but I would say being able to look at efficiency over time in multiple swings is very important. So you can definitely expect to see the same type of report looking at the data from the kinematic sequence.
Okay. And we have a KVest question from Todd. On KVest, why is side bend away from target a positive number when everything else, including rotation away from target, is negative?
Just to make it a little bit challenging to remember. That's my honest answer. Because you're right, everything, rotation away is negative. I bend away. So yeah, the side bend's always a little bit opposite, and I think it's actually a good way to remember it is, side bend is just the opposite of the other ones. Doc, I don't know, does your system, how does it measure side bend? Is it different than the KVS?
It's the same. It's a positive rotation about the axis that's running parallel with the target line. So in our system, that's the x-axis. So if you were to take your fingers like this, let me turn side on, and if my thumb is pointing down the positive sway axis in our system, and our curl and my fingers are pointing to the y-axis, when I complete the rotation, that would be a positive rotation. So bending back this way would be a positive rotation. What with tilt, you would have to move the z-axis into the x-axis, and that would be a positive rotation. So the z-axis is up my back, the x-axis is there. When I rotate to my right there, that would be a positive rotation. So that's why it is done in that way. And I'm pretty sure that when Phil did the rotations for AMM, it's the same, and then similarly when he advised you on the KVS stuff, Tony.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right.
All right, we have a question from John. How do you measure hip sway from what point on the body, from tailbone, question mark? What are your averages in the backswing?
Doc, I'll let you take that one if you'd like.
So to be able to measure that, you need a 6-DOF system. So that's the first point. And then what point you're measuring is dependent on how that system is calibrated as well. So if you, for example, choose the midpoint between the greater trochanters as the center of the pelvis, then you would expect during the backswing that as you turn and load onto your trail side, that you would get zero sway away from the target. In fact, what you would see with typically with good players is no sway to the right. This is with a mid iron, maybe a little bit with a driver, but no sway to the right. And then as they're approaching the turnaround point or the top of the transition, they'll actually start moving the center of the pelvis toward the target. Even though it's rotated closed still, they're starting to shift or sway towards the target before they complete the rotation on the backswing. So basically you can say zero sway on the backswing, and then something like about 4 inches toward the target on the downswing.
Yeah, exactly. And that applies exactly like our 6D system, where that's why we do the digitizing points on the greater trochanter. So basically you're virtually putting that sensor inside the body. So same process there for KVS users, anyone that has 6D.
All right, the next question. Should you compare swings over multiple lessons or long-term when looking at averages? And what are the benefits or negatives to doing this?
Doc, you've got more experience than this than me. I'm going to let you take this one as well.
Mason, can you just repeat the question again?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Should you compare swings over multiple lessons or long-term when looking at averages? And what are the benefits or negatives?
So the benefit of doing that, I think you should do it, by the way. The benefit of doing that is that you can provide a player and or their coach with insight into the development of the patterns of movement. So again, moving away from single swing analysis allows you to do this with confidence. So if you look at what they did on average 18 months ago, then 12 months ago, then 6 months ago, and then today, you should see progress in the variables that you are trying to measure. Or trying to change, I should say. If, for example, you were working on eliminating someone's sway on the backswing, or improving their turn on the backswing, or their rotational position at impact, then you would have measures that would allow you to see if they're making progress. And then if they weren't, you can really tackle the reasons why. But if you don't have that measurement in the first place, then you're going, oh, well, I don't know what you were 12 months ago or 18 months ago, so I don't know if you've changed or not. Or if you haven't changed, then is it a physical issue? Is it a conceptual issue? Is it that we're not giving you the right drills or whatever? So I think that, it, again, allows you to be a better coach because you can track the changes or the progress that someone's making as a function of time.
Very good. Well, we are at the top of the hour. We have a few more questions, but I'm sure Tony and Dr. Neal will answer those and we can get them out to emails to everybody. The one question we did get repeatedly is, yes, we are recording this webinar and we will send it out to everybody. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen.
Good. Thanks, Mason. And Doc, thanks for taking the time to join today, and would like to thank everybody that took the time out of their day to join this webinar. I hope you gained some knowledge out of it. And for all the KVS customers, we look forward to getting this new multi-swing report out to you as soon as possible.
Thanks, Tony. Thanks, Mason.
Thanks, Doc. Cheers, everybody.